Hello and welcome back. We're going to be playing another chess game here, and we have a game against 1600, I guess. Yeah, I was going to abort that game anyway and look for a higher rated opponent. Okay, we have a 1850 here, and we're playing with the white pieces. Nice, so we'll play e5, and we're probably expecting, e4, e5, e4, c5 is just whatever opening this opponent plays. But I'm expecting from a higher rated opponent, probably this is Sicilian defense. We have e4, e5, and we have the Philidor defense. Wow. Okay, so we get to play the Philidor at a higher rating. We'll play d4, and then take back with the knight here, the exchange variation. We had this, I believe, in the last video. And we'll go with the most natural developing move here, knight c3, defending our pawn. And in response to knight c6, I will transpose this to the Steinitz defense, but we have bishop to e7, to which I will respond bishop to f4, and now queen d2, setting up a battery that we can use towards the king side here. In the last game, we had c5 in a similar position to this, and knight d to b5 hit the board, and he was unable to defend this pawn. But our opponent is a little bit stronger than the one we encountered last time, so I'm expecting something like knight c6 is a fine move here, and we'll go for long castles most likely, followed by a pawn storm on the king side. So this is a little bit exciting. We may get a position here that is very double-edged here, and go into some really sharp tactical lines, I guess you could say, within the Philidor system we have set up here. So our opponent is thinking now. I believe the response to knight c6, I just reviewed this line basically, but I believe it was actually knight f5, if I'm not confusing lines here. And knight f5 is basically just inviting the bishop to take, and we recapture, but we'll castle on the next move and then start a pawn storm in this side. So our opponent is thinking here. Move 7. So we have a6. A little bit, in a sense, this is a waiting move. And we could play a move that is not a waiting move for sure. We could play h4 here before even castling, because we don't necessarily need to even castle yet. You could play h4, and the threat is h5 and h6. Pretty straightforward, like just playing along this kingside flank here, because if the opponent pushes their pawn to h6, now we have a battery pointed at a kingside pawn. So I think h4 is probably pretty solid here. Solid move with a clear intention, I would say, to initiate our pawn storm on the king side. And a6, it's starting the pawn storm. G5 here. And the threat is, so a6, b5. The threat is to, when he pushes b4 here, our knight will leave the defense of this pawn. So is there a way we can both develop like prophylactically to this move, or should we keep insisting on throwing our pawn at the kingside? Well, I think this threat is a lot more potent than our threat of getting the pawn up the board here. It also happens next move, while this, it doesn't contact anything on the next move. So I feel like bishop to d3 in that sense, it adds an additional defender of this pawn. And if we have something like b4, now we can move knight to d5 and offer, I guess, an exchange of knights here. And if the bishop takes, now we just have an open file we can use. So I don't think we should be worried about our pawn on h4 getting captured. So I think bishop d3 combines, in a sense, prophylaxis with piece development and also developing our pieces. So we have c5 here, and we can actually move knight to f5 here. And if bishop takes, we take here. All right, we have c4 kind of just completing this this pawn chain here. Let me see. Let me calculate the move. I believe we want to take here, actually, and then play bishop to e2. Because he is winning a pawn here, but then we win a pawn here, and material is equal. Should we be worried about takes? I think this position is pretty much equal here. Because we have not committed our king. And we're threatening to play bishop here, if nothing else. Bishop here might actually be a response to knight takes, because knight takes, bishop takes. Rook here. Yeah, bishop takes might be a decent response, actually, rook to knight takes e4, which didn't catch my... No, well, what am I saying? Because this knight actually defends this pawn is something that completely shuts down that calculation on the spot. So knight takes essentially forces knight here, whereupon queen takes. Maybe we could actually castle here and try to use the development, because now I see this threat of bishop f3, utilizing the fact that his pieces are underdeveloped here, and we are going to win this pawn back anyway. So I think probably a more accurate move would be to get our king out of the center here, and that could either be done through castling long ways or castling short. But I like castling short a little bit better because of this pawn chain that is pretty close to making contact with our queen side. So let's do that. And of course our queen defends both our bishops here. It's a key thing to note. So we're threatening bishop to f3, skewering his queen to his rook. We're also threatening this pawn here, so I think material will be regained either way. And we can use this bishop pair, I think, as really effective compensation to our pawn, and we're most likely, I think he has to give this pawn back. I think, but it will depend, like, we have to be careful about how we take, because if we take with a bishop, we might get, like, our bishop pinned to our queen here. Might get pinned. So this is something to be mindful of here. I believe the bishop pair is very nice here. It's very nice that we have an open game in the bishop pair. So I think queen takes is a very straightforward way to regain material. And queen takes, bishop takes, rook here. I think we actually have the tactical move bishop to f3 first, because we take his bishop. And then if rook comes back down to d2, we have bishop to e4, guarding the pawn. And then his knight has to develop before his other rook gets there, and we can kick out his rook from our territory. So I think queen takes is a very straightforward way, and we're not worried about this, of course, yet. Now bishop to f3 is still powerful here, and we want to keep the bishop pair as our advantage. So this is forced if he plays queen takes. If he plays queen takes, and then, so we can pre-move that, and then rook, let's calculate that, rook to d8, bishop f3, because takes, we take this, and he has no way to trap our bishop. Then he can move rook to d2. We can drop our bishop back to e4, defending the pawn. Rook, maybe rook to e2, but then we have rook to e1, adding defense to our bishop. And he will have to essentially leave or exchange his rook. Yeah, bishop f3 is also a really good tactical shot after the exchange of queens, assuming this happens, because if the rook leaves, if he tries to save the rook, he drops the knight because of his lack of development here. And that may be like kind of hard for those who are not as experienced in chess to see all these moves I'm talking about, but I can demonstrate them after the game, I think, here. He also has the move queen takes, threatening our bishop, but I think bishop f3 comes with a severe threat of just winning his knight because he has nowhere else to retreat. If he plays a move like queen takes here, yeah, bishop f3 is like a massive threat almost to anything white or black is going to play, I mean. Because now rook here is probably the most natural, but I think it loses on the spot to bishop f3. I think it loses, like, genuinely, it just loses on the spot, or at least it loses it in exchange. I think there's not a continuation to which I don't see it. And if he doesn't even play like rook d8, like, let's say he plays like, I think bishop b7 might be the most solid way to shut down, but then I just take the rook. Like, his rook is actively under attack. So I think this is like, this might honestly just be a losing position for black, which is kind of incredible to think about, that the material can be like totally equal in a position like this. But yeah, I think the tactical shot, bishop f3, we already calculated. Because takes, rook here, bishop e4, rook to e2, rook to e1, and he has to give up his rook, and he has essentially no compensation. And if rook here, we take the knight. So bishop f3. I believe I calculated this all already, hopefully correctly. Yeah, now we just take the knight. So now we're up a full piece. Now we're up a full piece rather than an exchange. So I think this option was probably even worse for black. Yeah, this bishop pair is going to be very powerful here. It's going to be a powerful tool in our arsenal we can use. Probably the best continuation now for black is to play rook to d7 there, but then we can just double stack our rooks. So we just have resignation on the board here. All right, so it looks like there was a mistake somewhere among our moves. So let's see. That was a nice tactical shot, a nice calculation there at the end. But let's go into a game review first. So let's review our game, see if I actually made a mistake here. So e4, e5, knight f3, d6. I'm pretty surprised that Philidor would be occurring at this high of a level. Usually the Philidor kind of has a shoddy reputation. But I guess 1800 isn't like too high of an elo online to be playing. A lot of viewers might disagree with that, but bishop f4 is a good move in this position, setting up the battery, and queen d2. So we have a6, and I'm sensing that maybe the mistake I made came down to allowing this like massive pawn advance here. So h4 might have been premature. Maybe I should have castled first. So b5 on the board, and bishop to d3. Yeah, that was probably the mistake here, because we saw later I had to retreat my bishop to e2 anyways. So castling, kind of counterintuitive, but castling into this is the best option that the computer gives, and then playing with this double-sided castling. Because I calculated castles, and then I just thought, what if he pushes here? Because it looks like this knight moves, and I'm losing the pawn. But yeah, castles. What if b4? Then we jump with the knight into d5. And what if the knight takes here? Well, now we have queen to e3. And this is a tactic like skewering the knight to the bishop here, and we win a piece, up a piece. So I was scared of this move. I didn't calculate, and that's why I just stayed away from this line. After b5, so bishop d3 was incorrect here, just straight out, because of c5, which our opponent does find. So they find c5, and then the fact, maybe this actually wasn't the most accurate. I was thinking our opponent would go for this, kicking both of our knights, because the fact that I put my knight, I did put my knight on f5, and I thought he was going to go for this, but he went for this push, which I don't think, it says you should just take first of all, and then I was fearing b4 more than c4, but c4, it allows my knight to remain in place, and now I kind of like, I exchange first of all, because I don't want to allow this. That's one of my main problems. And then bishop e2 is important, because later on it's going to be returned to this diagonal, and there's going to be serious consequences for that. So knight takes, and then I castled short, just because I see, like, tactically that this pawn is not going to be able to be defended anyway. There's no rush to take it. You can castle first, and then there's bigger threats on the board after you castle, such as bishop f3 is almost, it's like a threat in almost like every position, every continuation that I could see here. Like bishop f3, like right here, already wins, I guess. Bishop f3, because rook here, and then you take with a bishop. But then what about rook here? No, that's not the continuation they're calculating. They're calculating some different. Bishop f3, rook a7, queen d4, bishop b7, h5, and then you're just using your development to get, like, I don't know. That's a weird computerish line in my mind. But queen takes, the simplest way to regain material balance here. And then, bishop b7 was definitely a way to shut down any chance of me exploiting this diagonal. And it definitely should have been played. It also, no, it threatens checkmate in one move. So queen takes, so basically the queens would have to be traded, and then we'd be playing the bishop pair versus the knight and bishop in sort of an endgame already, pretty much. But he doesn't play, he plays the exchange, and then this nice tactical shot, bishop to f3. Because if the rook moves, the other bishop takes. And yeah, I was calculating rook takes, bishop takes rook, rook to d2 to try to get, I guess, the most compensation for it he can in this position. And I was calculating bishop back to e4, rook e2 here, attacking the bishop, and then we play rook e1, and everything is nicely guarded. If he takes a bishop, we take the rook. if he takes the rook, we take back with the rook here, and it's just a trade, and we're up in exchange. And these pawns can probably be attacked later on. Note, you could even play like another tactical move here, like rook to d1, because if he takes a bishop, you back rank mate him like this, and then he has to return and you take. But rook e1 is the move I calculated, so I thought it was a little bit simpler. But anyways, yeah, that's what went down in the game. It was a good game. It just resigned. So opening analysis here, we have seen this setup, I guess, in one of my other videos as well against the Philidor, setting up this battery and going for like this double-edged game. So I guess h4 here is good. It might be a little bit premature, and against b5 you can just castle into this because of this tactic here that we discovered with analysis, just winning a piece basically on the spot. And c6, you play knight takes e7 check, and then f3, pinning the knight to the queen there, and you're gonna win a piece eventually. So that's a nice little tactic there we discovered. So I shouldn't have been afraid to castle. I was, and bishop d3 is definitely a mistake place. Like if you want to develop your bishop against this position, probably bishop e2 would be a little bit more wise. Yeah, it wouldn't be as much of a mistake as bishop d3. And so I don't know what else I can say about this position. I kind of already went into a more in-depth analysis on the Philidor in another video, so I'll leave that up for the viewers to research, and that will be the conclusion of this video. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was another Philidor game. I think the highest rated opponent so far, but I mean, bishop f3, really nice tactic. So hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next one.